When my daughter hugged me at the door and said, "I'm so glad you're okay, Dad," I thought the worst was over. After surviving heart surgery and being released early, I expected silence, an empty home, maybe a leftover casserole from a neighbor. What I walked into was laughter in the living room, wine glasses on the table, and my daughter and her husband watching TV in my house like it belonged to them. For a moment, I thought maybe this was reconciliation, but it wasn't. 10 days later, I was sleeping in my car outside the same house I'd paid off over 30 years ago, locked out by the same daughter I had just trusted with my keys and my will. She didn't just want to reconnect. She wanted everything. And she almost got it. My home, my money, and my name, until I remembered who I was. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, not from a stranger, but from the person you loved the most, you'll want to hear this story. Because what started with a second chance ended with a court summons, a public confession, and one sentence that changed everything. Your daughter says you're no longer mentally capable of handling your own affairs. Before we get into this story of silence, strategy, and the coldest kind of revenge, don't blink. Because just when you think you've seen the villain, the mirror might turn. My name is Douglas Miller. I'm 65 years old, and 2 weeks ago, I had heart surgery that almost killed me. Technically, it was the surgery that saved me, but it's the days before and after that carved something deeper than any scalpel could. After the divorce 20 years ago, I made a choice that I've revisited every single day since. I let my ex-wife take full custody of our daughter, Emily. I told myself it was the right thing, that she needed her mother more than me. I thought I was being noble, responsible. But time has a cruel way of turning decisions into regrets and silence into distance. I didn't disappear completely. I paid child support without missing a single payment. Birthdays, Christmas, her graduation. I sent cards, money, and tried to call, though they often went unanswered. I watched Emily grow up through photos sent by my ex, and eventually through the filtered lens of her social media. It's a strange thing, watching your child's life unfold from behind a screen, like you're observing someone else's kid, someone else's story. Lately, something in me stirred. Maybe it was turning 65. Maybe it was waking up alone too many mornings in a house filled with dust and old memories. Or maybe it was the fear, real, physical fear, that I didn't have many mornings left. I started sending letters again. Not emails. Letters. Handwritten. I told Emily I was sorry. I told her I missed her, that I thought about her every damn day. But the silence continued. Then came the heart attack. They called it minor, which is a cruel word for the moment your chest tightens like a vice and your vision goes dark. The doctor said I was lucky, said they caught it in time. They kept me for a few days, told me they wanted to monitor me a full week. But I was healing fast. Too fast, maybe. 3 days later, they said I could go home, and I did, alone, with a plastic bag of meds and a heart that beat like a clock that knew its days were numbered. I remember standing in front of my front door, fumbling for the key. The wind was sharp. Autumn had come early, and with it that brittle edge in the air that made you feel older than your years. I pushed the door open and stepped into warmth, but not the kind I expected. There was laughter, light, voices. At first I thought maybe I was hearing things, meds, delirium, something. But no, There was the sound again. Laughter, muffled by walls, but unmistakably real. I stepped into the living room and saw them. Emily, my daughter, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine in her hand, legs tucked under her, like she belonged there. Next to her, a man I'd only seen once, in a Facebook post I shouldn't have clicked on. Her husband, Kyle. They didn't see me at first. I stood there, silent, breath held, like I was intruding into someone else's home. Then Emily looked up. For a second, her face froze. I expected anger, annoyance, maybe even guilt. What I didn't expect was tears. "Dad," she whispered, standing quickly, setting the wine glass down. "You're home early." She rushed toward me, wrapped her arms around me. Her voice cracked. "I thought you'd still be in the hospital." It was the first time in over a decade that my daughter had touched me. I stood there, stiff, trying to process it. Her perfume was different, her hair darker, but it was her. "I missed you," she whispered. "I didn't know if you were going to make it." And for a moment, just one fragile moment, I believed it. I believed the hug, the tears, the warmth. I believed that maybe, just maybe, my letters had meant something, that my near death had shaken something loose, that we were finally finding our way back to each other. I sat down, weak from the surprise and surgery. Kyle brought me water. Emily tucked a blanket around my legs. They asked questions about the hospital, about my meds, about the doctor's instructions. They made it seem like they cared, like I mattered. But even as I answered, something felt off. A glass I'd never owned on the coffee table. Pillows out of place. A vase I hadn't seen before. Boxes in the hallway labeled guest room. And then Emily said, "I hope you don't mind. We've just been staying here a few days while the furnace at our apartment's getting fixed." I smiled, nodded. But inside, a chill spread that had nothing to do with October. Because I knew Emily never told me she was having heating problems, and she definitely hadn't asked for permission. And the guest room? That door had been locked when I left. The days that followed felt like something out of a forgotten dream. Emily stayed. She brought tea in the mornings, folded laundry that didn't need folding, fluffed pillows I didn't care about. Kyle made dinner, simple stuff, like pasta or reheated soup. But the smell of someone else cooking in my kitchen was strangely comforting. For the first time in years, I wasn't alone, and it terrified me how much I liked it. Emily sat next to me one evening, her hands wrapped around a mug, the steam curling around her face like smoke. "I know we haven't had a relationship," she said softly, "but maybe this is our chance. Our chance." Those words wrapped around my chest tighter than the bandages after surgery. I nodded, trying not to get emotional. "I'd like that," I said. "I'd really like that." And I meant it. I told her I wanted to put her name on the house. It felt right. She was all I had. I wanted her to have something solid, something permanent. "Tomorrow," I said, "we'll go over the paperwork. I've got everything in the safe." She smiled, soft, warm, maybe even a little relieved. The next morning, I went to the safe. That was when everything changed. The code clicked, the door swung open, and nothing looked the way I left it. The folders had been moved. My insurance documents were out of order. The property deed was on top, when I distinctly remembered putting it underneath 2 envelopes. And there, sitting neatly folded, was a copy of my original will. Opened. At first I thought maybe I had forgotten. Maybe I had checked it before surgery. Maybe I was just confused. But there was dust missing. A clean outline in the shape of a folder, no longer there. Someone had been in here, and it hadn't been me. I closed the safe gently, careful not to let the sound betray my heartbeat. That evening, I sat in my chair and watched Emily laugh at something Kyle said. I smiled too, but only because I didn't know what else to do. My eyes didn't leave her hands, her gestures, the way she moved through the house like someone who already owned it. She looked comfortable, too comfortable. The next day, I got my first real confirmation. My neighbor, Mrs. Green, a retired nurse who spent most of her time tending roses and minding everyone's business, waved me over when I stepped outside to get the mail. "Glad you're feeling better," she said, peering over her fence. "They were worried sick, you know." "They?" I asked, playing dumb. "Your daughter and her husband. Sweet couple. Been staying here since the day you went into the hospital. Had a little BBQ out back last weekend. Thought it was nice of you to let them use the place." My mouth went dry. Barbecue? They'd moved in while I was unconscious on a hospital bed. I nodded slowly, thanked her, and turned back to the house. Inside, I sat down and opened the mailbox on the kitchen counter. Most of it was junk, a few bills. Then tucked into an unmarked envelope, I found it. A notarized document labeled Power of Attorney Authorization. My name was typed cleanly at the bottom, and next to it, my signature. Only, I didn't sign it. Not that one. The lines were wrong. The loop in the D was too wide. The tail on the M didn't dip the way mine always did. It was close, but not close enough. Someone had forged my name, and that someone had filed it. My body felt cold. Not like sickness, not like recovery, like betrayal. I sat back in the chair and looked around at the house. My sanctuary, my only real possession in the world. And now, it wasn't just invaded, it was in danger. Emily was upstairs, talking on the phone. I heard laughter. Light. The same comfort I once felt now made my skin crawl. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I drove to an electronics store and bought 3 tiny cameras and a voice recorder. I spent the next afternoon installing them. One in the kitchen, one in the hallway, one near the safe. I hid the recorder in the living room lamp. By evening, I had my first recording. Emily and Kyle talking about timing. Kyle asked, "You sure it's legal?" Emily laughed. "He's not going to fight it. He thinks we're reconnecting. He's so desperate for forgiveness, he'll hand over the house with a smile." That night, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw not a father, but a fool. But fools can learn. And this one had just woken up. I stopped answering questions. I stopped offering information. I let my hands shake a little more when I held my coffee, took longer to walk up the stairs, paused more often, breathing heavily, like a man still fragile from surgery. And I watched. Emily didn't seem to notice, or maybe she did, and thought it confirmed what she needed to believe, that I was getting weaker, easier to steer. She smiled more, touched my arm when she talked, told me I should rest when Kyle brought up money or bills. She played the role of the concerned daughter so well, I almost believed it again. But the cameras saw something different. The footage showed her walking confidently through the house, opening my drawers, checking files. At night, she sat at the kitchen table with my financial statements, making notes. Kyle was never there. He worked late. When he came home, she was sweet, affectionate, told him I was still recovering, and a little foggy. He nodded like a man who'd been reassured one too many times. I almost felt sorry for him. Then came the phone call. I heard it through the recorder in the living room lamp. Emily pacing, voice low but sharp. "He won't last much longer," she said. "He's already talking about giving me everything. Just a matter of keeping him calm. And once it's in my name..." A pause. "I don't care what he wants. He left us. He doesn't get to keep the house. He doesn't get to die with dignity. He's going to leave the same way he lived, alone." Silence. Then a laugh. "I'll make sure of it." That night, I watched the footage with Walter, my old friend, an attorney. He said nothing until the call ended. Then he looked at me, jaw tight. "Are you ready to fight back?" I nodded, but not yet. The next morning, I cooked breakfast. My hands still trembled, only now, by design. Kyle joined me at the table, rubbing his eyes. "You okay, sir?" "Just tired," I said. "But I'm glad you're here. Emily says you two are looking at houses. Maybe I can help with the down payment." His face lit up. "Really?" "She's a good daughter." I lied. "She deserves something." Kyle reached out and squeezed my shoulder. "Thanks, Mr. Miller. That means a lot." Later that day, I watched the footage again. Kyle was talking to Emily. "Your dad wants to help us buy a house," he said. "Maybe he's finally trying." Emily didn't reply. She just stared at him. That's when I realized. Kyle had no idea. He wasn't the puppet master. He was just the puppet. That night, I opened my laptop and rewrote my will. Not for Emily. Not for Kyle. Not even for me. For the ones like me. Alone, aging, manipulated. The ones no one protects. I left everything. House, savings, pension, to a nonprofit that helped the elderly fight back against financial abuse. The kind no one talks about until it's too late. I printed it, signed it, locked it in a new safe. Then I slept. It didn't last long. 2 days later, Emily burst into my room. Her face wasn't angry. It was panicked. "I saw the new will," she said. "What the hell is this?" I didn't answer. She stepped closer. "You're giving everything away to strangers? To people who actually care what happens to people like me," I said. She stared. "You're insane." I laughed. "No, just awake." She left without another word. 2 hours later, the police showed up. A polite knock. 2 uniforms at the door. One holding a clipboard. "Mr. Miller," one said, "we received a call from your daughter. She's concerned about your mental stability post-surgery." I smiled. "Is that so?" She said, "You've been forgetful, erratic, possibly signing documents you don't understand." I looked past them to where Emily stood on the lawn, arms crossed, cold eyes. "I'd like to speak to my attorney," I said. That night, I slept in a cot at Walter's guest room. The same night, my daughter slept in my bed. But not for long. Walter didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. When I showed up at his door that night, still dressed in the same clothes I'd been wearing when the police escorted me out of my own home, he just nodded and stepped aside. We sat in silence for a while. Then I opened my laptop and showed him everything. The camera footage, the forged signature, the audio recordings, the new will, every quiet detail I'd been gathering while pretending to be weak, clueless, finished. Walter clicked through the files like a surgeon prepping for operation. His eyes narrowed, jaw clenched. And then, without a word, he picked up his phone and started making calls. 2 days later, a legal complaint was filed with the county court. Petition for the revocation of fraudulent power of attorney, preliminary injunction for property recovery, and a formal charge of elder abuse, civil and criminal. It had taken a few weeks, but we had built a case. I spent the following days at Walter's house, reviewing bank statements, checking timestamps, printing documents, highlighting inconsistencies. The man who had spent a lifetime building planes was now engineering a different kind of precision, revenge by truth. Emily kept calling. At first, it was messages pretending to be concerned. Then came the voicemails. "Dad, we need to talk. You're being manipulated. You're overreacting." Then silence. Then, Kyle called. His voice was hesitant, like someone trying to find solid ground in a collapsing house. "Mr. Miller, can I talk to you?" I met him at a diner, just outside town. He sat across from me, his hands folded tight. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear to God, I thought you were okay with it. I thought Emily had talked to you. She told me you were giving her the house." I didn't speak. "I'm sorry," he added. "I feel like a fool." I nodded. "You weren't the only one." He looked down at his coffee. "She told me I was just there to make it look like a family again. That if I kept quiet, we'd both benefit. But she doesn't love me. She loves what she can take." He took a breath, then looked me in the eye. "If you need me to testify, I will." Walter filed the updated paperwork the next morning. The date for the first hearing was set. When we walked into the courtroom 2 weeks later, Emily was already there, dressed in soft colors, hair pulled back, makeup subtle. She looked like a daughter concerned for her elderly father. She clutched a tissue like it was a lifeline. The judge began the session. Emily's lawyer opened with a tearful explanation. Her client had only acted out of concern. Her father had shown signs of mental decline. He'd been distant, unengaged for years. She had stepped in to protect him. And yes, she might have overstepped, but it was only out of love. Then Emily spoke. She cried, talked about birthdays without her father, letters never answered, the pain of being invisible to the one man who should have never let go. She called it poetic justice. She called it closure. She called it a way to reclaim something she was owed. I watched in silence. And when it was my turn, I didn't stand. I didn't speak. Walter reached into the folder, pulled out a small device, and pressed play. Emily's voice filled the courtroom. "He doesn't get to die with dignity. He's going to leave the same way he lived, alone." Gasps, then silence. The judge asked for the recording to be replayed. It played again, and this time, when it ended, I turned. Not to the judge, not to Emily. To the people in the room. To the man in the back with his hand over his mouth. To the woman holding her chest, like the words had physically hit her. To Kyle, sitting quietly at the end of the bench, head bowed. No one looked at Emily. Not anymore. The room wasn't cold, but she shivered. She didn't speak again that day, and no one asked her to. The story broke 3 days after the hearing. A local journalist, someone Walter had quietly tipped off, ran a headline in the Sunday edition. Father returns home after heart surgery to find daughter living in his house with plans to take everything. The story spread like wildfire. Within hours, it was picked up by national outlets. The phrase, post-surgery home invasion, made its way into hashtags. Online forums dissected every detail. Talk shows debated whether Emily was a victim of abandonment or a symbol of greed. They quoted her words, those 5 sentences from the recording played in court, again and again. He doesn't get to die with dignity. He's going to leave the same way he lived, alone. People didn't forgive that easily. By the end of the week, Kyle had filed for divorce. In his statement, he cited emotional manipulation, dishonesty, and a fundamental betrayal of trust. His face appeared on one segment of a daytime news show where he calmly explained, "I thought I was part of a family. Turns out I was part of a con." Emily stopped answering her phone, stopped leaving the house, stopped posting online. The court's final ruling came quietly. There was no jail sentence. Walter said, pushing for that would have dragged things out unnecessarily. But the judgment was clear. The forged documents were invalidated, the power of attorney revoked, and all assets returned to me. Emily was ordered to vacate the property within 7 days. No financial restitution was required, but she was legally barred from acting in any fiduciary capacity on my behalf again. She lost more than the case. She lost the benefit of doubt. She lost her father's home, and in many ways, she lost the right to call herself his daughter. Reporters called, emailed, showed up at my gate. They wanted my side, my reaction, my pain. I didn't give them any of it. Instead, I gave them silence. Until one producer from a national talk show offered to fly me out for an exclusive. Big network. Prime time. Heartwarming redemption arc, they said. I declined, but I recorded a message. It wasn't long. Just a few minutes, really. I used to think being forgiven was something you could earn. That if you hurt someone and you apologized hard enough, long enough, they'd come around. I wrote letters. I made calls. I waited for replies that never came. And when they finally did, they weren't what I expected. I hoped my daughter would forgive me for being absent, for walking away during the hardest chapter of her childhood. But what I've learned is this: forgiveness is a gift, not a transaction. You can't demand it. You can't buy it. And you certainly can't steal it. And love without respect is just manipulation in costume. So no, I don't want an interview. I don't want sympathy. I don't even want justice anymore. I just want peace. And I found it in silence, in clarity, in letting go. I emailed the file to the network. They played it, unedited, with a single title card, a father's voice. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of letters arrived at Walter's office, from men like me, from daughters, from strangers, some angry, some grieving, some saying thank you. But the one that stayed with me the most came from a woman in Oregon who wrote, "My father left too. I always thought I'd punish him for it, until I heard your voice. Now, I think I'll call him." I didn't write back, but I smiled. Weeks passed. The house was quiet again. One morning, I drove to the center I'd named in my will, the nonprofit for elderly rights. I handed the director a sealed envelope. Inside was a check and a note. Use this to build something that protects the people no one thinks to protect, and name the fund after her. Not for glory, not for shame, just for remembrance. Call it the Emily Fund, a place to relearn kindness. They promised they would, and I walked back to my car, knowing some stories don't need a perfect ending to be finished. They just need to stop hurting. I never went back to the city. Some places, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. I moved to Maine, quiet, coastal, calm. The kind of town where you could walk to the market, where people still waved from their porches and asked how your day was going like they meant it. I found a little storefront off Main Street, used to be a bakery. I turned it into a bookshop. No grand opening, no press, just shelves and silence, and the soft tick of a clock no one ever wound. I called it Second Chapters. People wandered in slowly at first, tourists mostly, curious locals, then the regulars, retired teachers, wandering grandfathers, widows looking for something to hold on to. and somehow it grew. I kept a coffee pot by the door, a small sign that said, "One cup, one story, no judgment." Soon, I wasn't the only one telling stories. There were others, men mostly, who carried their own versions of betrayal. Some had lost everything to children who thought inheritance was a right. Some were still waiting for calls that never came. Some just needed someone to listen. So I started a group. No forms, no meetings, just a name. The Forgotten Fathers. We met on Sundays. We drank coffee and passed around old photos. We shared letters that were never answered, gifts that were never opened. We didn't blame. We didn't rage. We remembered. That was enough. I found peace in the routine. Mornings stocking shelves. Afternoons helping someone find a book that felt like an apology. Evenings alone, watching the tide crawl up the shore and back again. People asked me, now and then, about Emily. I never had an answer. I didn't know where she lived, if she remarried, if she worked, if she healed. I only knew what I told them, every time. She used to be the light in my life, I'd say. But darkness comes from light too. Sometimes they nodded. Sometimes they didn't understand. That was fine. The words weren't for them. They were for me. I stopped checking the news. Stopped following court updates. I told Walter to only call if something truly mattered. He never did. Years passed. I turned 70, then 71. One morning, while restocking the travel memoirs, I found a package on the counter. No return address, brown paper, slightly weathered. Just my name on the front and handwriting I didn't recognize. Neat, precise, uncertain. I opened it. Inside was a book, one I hadn't seen in decades. The Secret Garden. It was Emily's favorite when she was little. I used to read it to her on the nights my ex-wife worked late. She always begged me to do the voices, especially the robin. The cover was worn, the spine cracked just slightly, and across the first inside page, in dark blue ink, were 7 words. To Dad, I was wrong. E. I stood there a long time, holding that book like it might shatter if I breathed too hard. No letter, no explanation, no apology. Just those 7 words. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because some griefs dry you out so completely that when the good things finally come, there's nothing left to spill. I placed the book behind the counter, didn't put it back on the shelf, didn't scan it into inventory. It wasn't for sale. That Sunday, I read from it during our gathering, the chapter where the garden starts to bloom again. No one said anything. They didn't need to. That night, I walked down to the shore. The sky was low and gray, the kind of quiet dusk that doesn't announce itself, just settles in. I sat on the bench I'd claimed as my own, closed my eyes. I didn't think about what came next, about whether she'd write again, call, visit. I didn't need more, not anymore. I'd learned that healing doesn't always arrive like a sunrise. Sometimes it shows up like a package on the counter, late, unannounced, and just enough. And I remembered something Emily once said when she was 10, curled beside me on the couch, her voice soft with sleep. Do people stay mad forever? I told her no. But now, I finally believed it. Some people do change, even if it takes a lifetime, even if they only send 7 words.